Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. This is CMG TALK This. Is Catherine Gallagher. Welcome, and thanks for joining me today. And today, let's talk about the personality characteristic type of the accommodator, otherwise known as the people pleaser. And often people will say that to me. They'll often say, I find it hard to say no. I like to please people. It's nice to say yes. I like to be liked. Is this familiar? Right? Often people will say when they are an accommodator, which is a nice way of saying they're a pleaser. They'll often say, I like to accommodate. I like to say yes to people. Saying no, I was always taught, was never a nice thing to do. But sometimes I overly accommodate. Sometimes I say yes, even if I really can't and I should say no. Is this familiar? Are you thinking, Catherine, I'm that person. I'm that person. I'm all things to all people at all times, or so people think. I'm the person that everybody asks to do things. Probably because they pretty much assume that I will say yes. They don't really figure in I'll say no. Sometimes if I do try to push back, they'll say, well, you can say no, but they know if I say no. If they push back a bit with me, I will give in. Now, we know often if we're an accommodating person, we know often it's hard for us to say no with our boundaries. Sometimes it's easier to say no, not now. And sometimes people learn to say, if you want it to be at this time, then I'm not available, and maybe the best person to do that then at this time would be someone else. Sometimes it's easier to say to someone, I understand that's really important to you. I understand you want the messages, the shopping picked up. I understand you want to be able to arrange this party at this time, and you want me to be there to deliver or pick up, or you want me to do such and such for you. But for that to happen, I'm not available, so maybe someone else will be at that time. If it has to be then and it has to be that time, it can't be me. The all or nothing, the negotiation that we can figure in can give us that opportunity to set firmer and less flexible boundaries. Because sometimes an accommodator, the people pleaser, their boundaries are so flexible. They're so elasticated that people either don't respect them, don't recognise them, or just ignore them. Now, what happens if you are an accommodator and you're the people pleaser and always say yes, or pretty much the majority of times you say yes? How does that impact on you? How does it impact on you emotionally, mentally, psychologically, and physically often? If you're the one that's running around doing things, stressing yourself out. Sometimes saying yes to people feels good. It gives us a sense of feeling we're important, that what we do, what we say, how we contribute matters. It gives us a sense of validation, belonging, purpose, that we matter. But often if you're always doing it and think it always has to be us, and of course it doesn't always have to be you. But if we think and feel it does, or we give out signals that that's the case, we often sideline other people, and we prevent them from stepping up and stepping in and doing things because they feel that we'll always be there. what's the point? What's the point in me doing it because you'll always do it, or it'll always be done to your standard? Sometimes when we're learning as a people pleaser, an accommodator, to step away, to step down, to offer other people the opportunity to step in, we're giving them the opportunity to contribute, to feel valuable, validated, to feel that their contributions are just as important. We're allowing people to sometimes grow, learn, contribute, and feel appreciated, and to feel valued and validated too. If we're always accommodating, always being there, sometimes we do it even if we don't want to. Taking us back to, how does it impact on you? Well, that's where we often feel a grudge. We often feel put upon, taken for granted, underappreciated, overwhelmed. Sometimes even we might feel resentful. Why does it always have to be me? Here I am, here it goes again. It's always me. No one else does this. Just for once, I'd like others to step in and do their part. It's as if I'm the only one that has the free time. Just because I don't have, or just because my kids might be growing up, or just because I don't have kids, or just because I'm retired, or just because they think their career's more important, or my career's less important, or just because, or maybe because I keep saying yes. But what it's doing, how I'm feeling about it, I'm starting to build up a sense of feeling unhappy. And yes, maybe taken advantage of. And maybe a bit resentful, hurt. But yet I'm still saying yes. I'm not saying no. And why? Well, if I don't do it, who else will do it? If I say no, well, people will just say, well, I can't do it because I'm too busy and I don't have time and I'm really stressed and I've got priorities and it's not hard as, it's not as hard for you. It just won't get done if I don't do it. But here's the thing. If you're not there for some reason, just say, let's be nice about it here. You take a long vacation. Wouldn't that be lovely, right? You took a nice, long, beautiful vacation somewhere nice because you were always the one that was accommodating and everybody else said, you know what, we really do appreciate, value you, recognise everything you do. You take time out to take care of you. Have a nice, long, big vacation. We've got this. They'd manage. Because the reality is none of us are indispensable. And we learn that when times are challenged. We learn that when other people have to, through circumstances. They have to take that time to step in, to step up, when we can't, for whatever reason. Because we are unavailable, unavoidably detained. Maybe we are out the country. Maybe we have taken a holiday. Maybe our phones have disconnected. Maybe we had a pandemic. Maybe there's been something that has meant that we cannot be reached for some reason. Maybe it's been that everything has got so much that has impacted on our health that we just can't. We just can't. And then people, surprisingly, do take over. Step in, step up. Authorities, resources kick in. The answer here is balance, isn't it? It needs to be a well-oiled wheel where everybody does their bit. Because let's face it, we're all busy. Our lives are all important. We all have our priorities. Yeah. Accommodating, but not overly accommodating to the point where other people are constantly saying that it is always you. Because sometimes people do that because it means that they can then have their vacations, have their hobbies, have their time for them, and do lovely things for themselves to take care of them without figuring in that you need a bit of time and space for you too. So balance, perspective is really important. But unless we ask for it, unless we say, I am important too, this is as much as I can do, over to you. And be able and be prepared to say it doesn't always have to be me. People pleasing, accommodating, to the point where we overly extend ourselves is actually our choice. We do it often because we like to take care of, we like to nurture, we like to be there for other people. But we're not supposed to do it to a point where it's actually a disservice to ourselves, where it's causing us distress, where we're overwhelmed, where we can't look after ourselves. Because we end up burning out. We end up not being able to step up and be there for other people because we make ourselves unwell. Being able to say no is about self-care, self-respect, self-love. It's about being able to say you recognise that you matter too, just as much. So as much as it might feel good and think it seems nice to be saying yes, we have to get rid of the notion that saying no is a bad thing. Being able to say no to people is important. It's how we say it, why we say it, the circumstances we say it. We don't have to say it in a cruel, harsh, unforgiving way. No can be presented in a way where it's firm, but it's also fair-minded. Doesn't have to be cutting. I'm not able to do that. No, I cannot do that. I'll leave that with you. It might be that you present it in a way where you say, I'm not able to do the Wednesday and the Thursday. No, I can't do the Wednesday, Thursday. However, I'll continue to do the Tuesday and the Friday and one day at the weekend. I need to set a firmer boundary because I realise that I've not been actually doing enough of looking after me. And I know that I need to do more of that. Sometimes you have to understand it's not about explaining away. It's not about asking for permission. It's about saying to people, if I don't get a balance right, I'll not be any good to anybody. I need to be able to be more reasonably minded. I'm overdoing it. And the reality is, if we're constantly accommodating and we're constantly doing too much, people tend to know that that's the case around us. They recognise that you're the one that's always stepping up. But that often suits people around us because it means they don't have to. So sometimes we're just asking people to take their turn. So reflecting on it and understanding, if you're always stepping up and we're always the one that's doing stuff, right? What does that then mean for our loved ones when they don't get the time with us that necessarily they would want? Because we're always putting our focus elsewhere. Do they not deserve to have our attention? And do we not deserve to be able to have the time and space to look after ourselves too? Finding that right balance keeps ourselves in a good, healthy, emotional, physical and mental space. So, have you got the right balance? Are you somebody that would be seen as an overly accommodating, an over-accommodator, a people pleaser? Or would you say I was? I used to be Catherine, and actually I've got better at saying no now. Did it ever come to a point where you were like a pressure cooker and it came to a head and you exploded at people because you couldn't take any more? Because it wasn't dealt with soon enough. Because that's often the case. We end up saying things rather than dealing with it and diffusing it before it explodes. And sometimes we implode because we keep it all to ourselves and then suddenly we become really unwell. Prevention's better than cure. It's better to deal with it sooner, take back control, find the better balance, and then be able to have a healthier and a happier way of functioning. So it's never about saying, I think, it's never about saying to people that like to help people because they're caring, empathic and compassionate people and it's about kindness for them. It's not about saying to someone, well, you like to accommodate, but it's not, it's not something that you should do. No, it's about saying just get a balance. It's good to accommodate, but it's to do it in a way where you're not feeling that it's too much. And we know when we're overly accommodating. We know when we feel we're being taken advantage of. We know when we feel we're being so stretched to the point where we don't know whether we're coming or going. And we feel that we're chasing ourselves. And I guess many of us have ran ourselves around looking out for, doing everything for everyone else, exhausted. And then thought, why am I doing this? When we know there's other people that could have stepped in. And sometimes we hear other people telling us, we've been running around all day frantic, and then somebody tells us that they've had a lovely time, they've been away and they've, been at a match or they've been out having, some time with their friends or been getting pampering done, had their nails done and their hair done. And you're thinking, there's something not right here. And there's part of you is laughing maybe about it, but you could cry because you're just thinking, that's not okay. But you have to take responsibility because if you're always saying yes, you see, I have a rule of thumb here, right? I never say yes to something unless I know I can do it. I never sign up for something unless I know I can do it, right? And I always have this rule of thumb that I tell myself that I don't get to complain about something if I've agreed to it. So I always ask myself when I say yes, is this doable? Is this doable? Meaning, will this stretch me to a point where it's not achievable? Is it achievable? Realistic? Is it doable? Or is it actually going to be unrealistic? to the point where I'm overly stretched, overly stressed. So I always check in to figure out what's being asked of me. Because sometimes people will ask me to do things and I'd like to do it to accommodate, to help out. But I then look at what's being asked of me and I realise that it's actually either not reasonable, it's not realistic, it's not achievable. And I say to myself, for me to do that, it would be such a strain. I'd be overly accommodating and it wouldn't be worth the impact it would have on me emotionally, physically, psychologically, and in all ways. So I sit back and I say, thank you for the opportunity. I would love to have been able to help you out. But this time I'm going to have to say no. And then I direct them or signpost them to someone else that I think might be a better fit for it. Or if I don't know someone, I suggest maybe an agency or somewhere, or a professional body or somewhere, whatever is appropriate, where they could maybe get direction or signposting. Sometimes, because we want to help out, we will agree to things. Or because it's family, we don't want to let people down, we'll agree to things. Because it's work, and we don't want to be seen as not being cooperating or not taking one for the team, we'll agree to things. But sometimes we have to stop and think, well, if I'm just about to finish work, I've got a minute before work is finished, and I'm being asked to stay behind and finish off a piece of work that can wait, and actually I'm not being paid to do because it's now finishing time. Is it not reasonable to say to my manager, thanks for leaving that with me. I now know what my next piece of work will be when I first come in tomorrow morning. I'll pick that up and I'll start on it then. I've finished work now. I'm about to finish and leave for the day, and that's me, closed everything down. So I'll catch up on this tomorrow and I'll let you know how things are going at the earliest opportunity. Instead of, all right, okay, and feeling as if you're having to then open everything up, stay behind and get to it. And actually, it's not reasonable, it's not realistic. And actually, it's presenteeism, where you're being asked to do work that you're not being paid for. And is that really good on you psychologically and emotionally? Overly accommodating. And that's about boundaries. That's about expectations and about reasonable expectations. It's about knowing when you stop at work and when your personal time starts, because that's important to have those boundaries set so that you can look after you, recharge, re-energise, take care of you so you're fresh and able to return back to work and be able to deliver in productivity. It makes sense to be able to say, when do I stop work and when do I restart work? Overly accommodating is something that happens in all walks of life with people who like to be able to do things to help out, but often find it hard not to take on too much and not to overly extend themselves. But often it can actually have serious health consequences with high blood pressure and high heart rates, and it can cause major problems down the line. And we know this from research and studies, which is why I'm talking about it now and why I'm going on in exploring this subject, because many people will talk about the impact having had a history of constantly overly accommodating, doing too much, being overwhelmed, constantly stressed, feeling so much pressure, finding it really hard to set appropriate boundaries, switching off has been difficult, and the impact it's had on their health with stress, anxiety, and maybe other health conditions, high blood pressure. And it might be that they've had other health conditions as well, where they've maybe has suspected, other problems as well. Some people have gut problems. Some people have, suspected longer term illnesses and more serious illnesses because they're not taking care of their health, which is why it's important to recognise these issues, to catch them and to deal with them. Thanks for listening. And when you impact things like breathing techniques, mindfulness, learning boundaries, working on your internal self-talk, reframing things, learning how to set down reasonable, realistic expectations, it's easier then to be able to not find yourself in situations where you're extending yourself too much, where you're overly accommodating. Practice these tools so you get a better balance. Take care. Until next time, thanks for listening.